waters. He was able, for instance, to observe Chinese and Japanese fishermen deploying trained cormorants to catch fish on the Yangtze and Ngara rivers, and the use of toxic plants to stupefy fish in a lagoon in Fiji and in pools on the Benue River in northern Cameroon. It may be that these techniques were used somewhere in the British Isles in the dim and very distant past. Poisonous plants such as Verbascum phlomoides and Euphorbia villosa were still being resorted to on the Danube Delta and in the Carpathian region of Romania post-1945. But if so, that use can be presumed to have lapsed well before the start of what we regard as recorded history. So, for knowledge, we depend on remnants. Once we have those, it becomes possible to reconstruct what they formed part of, what that implement was used for, and how and when. The oldest known fish traps in Europe go back 7,000 years to the Mesolithic era, examples of which have been discovered as far afield as Ireland, Denmark, and Russia. The earliest confirmed trap in Britain, at Cold Harbour Pill on the western side of the Severn Estuary near Newport, has been carbon dated to the late Bronze Age, perhaps 1200 BCE. These and other prehistoric structures revealed their existence because the wooden posts and other materials used can survive many centuries if buried or half buried in mud. Archaeologists love them because they represent fact, data, proof. The fact that visually these pieces of blackened wood and fragments of basketwork are extremely unexciting matters not at all. They can be photographed, subjected to carbon dating, minutely described and compared with equally unexciting bits and bobs from elsewhere to build timelines and arcing narratives, thereby justifying the whole laborious process of discovery and excavation. But these finds are not the story. The fish trap at Cold Harbour Pill on the Severn represents one point in a timeline extending long before and long after. It was preceded by other devices installed for the same purpose, to intercept fish, chiefly salmon, eels, and shad, so that they might be killed and eaten by the communities that managed the trap or traded and bartered by them for other needs. It was followed by other traps used for the same purpose. 2,000 years later, the same principle was being followed in both sides of the estuary in the form of fixed ranks of baskets known as putchers or putts, more elaborate, more time-consuming to construct and maintain, more effective in terms of fish caught, but essentially no different. These survived until living memory, when the sudden collapse in salmon abundance put them out of business. There were two terms in Anglo-Saxon for these fixed traps, hatchweir and chewtweir, meaning fishweir and fishweir with baskets. The concept would have been recognizable the world over. A V-shaped barrier on a gently shelving stretch of foreshore covered and uncovered by the tides, generally facing upstream to take fish that moved in with the flood and dropped back on the ebb, with a net or basket at its apex. In London, the remains of fish weirs of this type have been uncovered close to the banks of the Thames at several locations, including Chelsea, Vauxhall, Isleworth, Kew, Hammersmith, and Brentford. The arms consisted of wattle hurdles fixed between oak or elm posts, and the apex trap was made of woven willow. Carbon analysis dates them to between 650 and 890 CE, but, again, it is certain that traps of a similar design would have been in use in roughly the same locations, generally across a channel between the shore and a sandbank or mudbank or an eyot, a river island, going back to the earliest human occupation. By its nature, a fixed trap is only effective in catching migrating fish, primarily salmon and eels, although on the Severn, lampreys and shad come into the equation as well. In tidal waters, Atlantic salmon returning from the sea to spawn in their birth rivers move up with the incoming tide and drop back on the ebb, biding their time until the river flow is strong enough for a decisive move upstream. Eels are intent on an opposite path. In autumn, in high water and in stormy conditions, they forge their way downstream, seeking the open sea and, eventually, the immensely far-distant Sargasso, where they mate and die. The migratory impulses of both salmon and eels means that they are also vulnerable to exploitation at any point in fresh water from nets and other kinds of traps.